stuff like, I mean, there are companies out there like Google that could just sort of get into your space and do whatever you want at any time. And I mean, I think that like one of the cool things about like this time in technology is that individuals are leveraged and able to do way more than they'd really ever been able to do before. You know, and like even like 4 years ago when Google was started, I mean, now they have hundreds of thousands of machines, you know, and probably billions of dollars spent on equipment. I think like the generation before Google, you couldn't even make a site without sort of like some big piece of hardware. And I think like eBay, for example, ran off of 2 like $50,000 machines or something. And like it's like you just can't start doing that if you're just a kid in a dorm room, you know? So I think that like the fact that we could sort of rent machines for, you know, like $100 a month and use that to scale up to a point where we had 300,000 users is pretty cool, and it's a pretty unique thing that's going on in technology right now. And I mean, it like makes it so that instead of worrying about just like who's sort of the big player and like what is Google going to do next, you can do more of like you could just like get a lot of stuff done. And I mean, instead of like having to go out and have some of the traditional business problems, like you have to raise capital before you can make anything, like that's no longer an issue. So you can just like, you're leveraged to do a lot more on your own now. I don't know if that kind of answers the question that you're asking, but I mean, it's one of the reasons why I think that at this point it makes a lot of sense to be studying this stuff, because like at no point in the past could you leverage like such a small amount of money to get powerful enough technology to really touch people in the way that you can today. So I mean, Google does about 250 million page views a day, right? They have hundreds of thousands of machines and like 5,000 employees. Facebook does 400 million page views a day. So that's like almost, you know, I mean, that's like a lot more than Google does, you know? And we have hundreds of machines and we just passed 50 employees. So like, and that's just like a sort of a technical generation of 3 or 4 years in the architectures that were created. So I mean, and then you go like 3 or 4 years back before that from like eBay to Google, and it's just completely different, because I mean, at least Google was running off of this like a lot of distributed equipment that, I mean, they have hundreds of thousands of machines, but the idea there was get a lot of shitty machines, you know, that are like really cheap. And I mean, that's a big step up, because then it's like, okay, that's more redundant. You know, I mean, they're not losing information. They don't expect stuff to always work. It's a much more kind of mature attitude than eBay's, which I mean was the only thing that they could do at the time. But yeah. So.
I have a question about the DHT stuff.
The what?
The distributed hash table stuff.
Yeah. Well, which one?
I was just wondering if you've have you released at all like your extensions to Memcache? Because one thing I've noticed is that there aren't really good available libraries for DHT stuff. There's all this wonderful research, but in terms of implementations that actually deal with all the redundancy issues and all those things.
Yeah. A lot of the stuff that we didn't necessarily extend Memcache, we like built a bunch of stuff like ourselves. So I mean, right now it's not open source. I mean, we consider doing it, and I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into making stuff open source, which I mean, it's like on top of whether or not you want to like lose the competitive advantage. It's just like it's kind of unfortunate, because I mean, I think that if it were just easier to make something like that, then you could do it. Like you could just like release the code, but like then there's a lot of support, you know, and like licensing and all that stuff. And I don't know. We found that it's been kind of annoying. I mean, one of the things that we actually considered making open source was this search server that actually that guy sitting right there made while he was still out in California. And I guess like we got to a point where MySQL was lagging a little on some of the searches that we were trying to do. And we decided that it would be a cool thing to do to just like make sort of a series of like distributed machines that could kind of, he doesn't use a hash table. What's the structure that you use, McCollum? So I mean, yeah, we thought about making that open, but then like that's when we kind of like had to do all this work to like come up with a license, and we're just like, all right, you know, screw that. But
yo. What do you spend most of your work time
hiring people. I guess like as you grow, like the most important thing is to have smart people, right? I mean, like, and if you think about how, like the technical leverage stuff that I was just talking about and answering that guy's question, like as technology becomes sort of more generic and less expensive, the leverage point becomes more in the people. So I mean, if you kind of think about this from a perspective of like a person to people time spent, or like user time spent, or page view analysis, it's like because of technology now, like people are much more leveraged to kind of do and to do more things and just be more important in the equation. So because of that, it's like really important to get the most intelligent people. And also, I mean, it's like when you're a small company, then you can be really nimble and get a lot of stuff done, and there's relatively little bureaucracy. So if you have smart people who can take advantage of that to build cool things, then that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I guess besides that, I don't know, designing new things. There's not much corporate bureaucracy yet, so I don't have to waste that much time on that. Keep on going. Yeah.
How much have you spoken, consulted with lawyers so far?
I have a lawyer who works for me full time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it like a big part of running a business? Like, would you recommend working on with lawyers early on?
We didn't, and that, I guess, provided some annoyance later on. I guess like getting stuff set up really well is good, right? I mean, it's like getting stuff clean is really good. And I mean, no one's ever going to tell you like, oh, like a lawyer's bad. It's all just a question of opportunity cost and what you prioritize, right? And like I guess that in our case, it's like we now have to deal with like a bunch of stuff that wasn't set up properly in the beginning. But like, I mean, actually most of that stuff is dealt with, so I mean, it's not even a big deal anymore. But like, but instead of talking to lawyers early on, we were making stuff, and like I think that was probably the right use of our time. So it's like, I mean, I think that one cool characteristic of a lot of the companies that end up being really successful, not that we are really successful, but I guess we also fall into this bucket, is that they started off as someone trying to make something cool and not someone trying to make a company. And like, I mean, you kind of have, like Google came out of Larry and Sergey's like PhD dissertation at Stanford, and Yahoo came out of just like, I guess, also some Stanford guys just like kind of screwing around in their dorm room. And eBay came out of like some guy trying to build a marketplace for his girlfriend to exchange Pez dispensers. Amazon was a little more calculated. But I mean, so I can't imagine that any of those people really had that much advice.